and then we'll just do the fucking 14 trains across London.
And that flight's at what time? That was 5:30. Was it?
5:30, yeah. Should we make it down by like 10 o'clock?
Be earlier.
Yeah.
No, the trains are good in London, because we'll be there at 6:30.
Yeah.
So like, is that a Friday evening? Yeah.
Friday evening, yeah. Yeah, no, we'll be grand. Right, we're live.
What about getting back?
I haven't looked at it.
Yeah.
You can hear us?
Sometimes all I think about is you. Nights. Taking out pool.
Is that recording?
Yep. Give a minute there. We'll have to give a minute because sure.
There's only 2 of them here.
Sure, there are no questions. Like,
where's the other one? There he is. Surround sound.
Okay, so we've got
that one there, 15 or 17:15.
That's
we
it.
booked that.
Stan says the travel lab, is it? Did you build it?
No. No, I wasn't sure how many would be there for. Did you check in for tomorrow?
No.
I just checked in there.
What accounts is that? Our seat account there?
Yeah. Oh no.
No, it's blue
here. Ben says, sup lads. Sup Ben. Bracelets.
Do you just log in and Google it? Oh, you can't.
I just went to our emails and then pulled it out of our emails, got the reservation number and the last name. Just fits beep and the reservation number. Just keep asking your questions there and we'll get her done. Right. John Burkhardt asks, why don't people switch their split stance jerk? I assume, John, you're asking, like, why don't people go left foot forward sometimes and right foot forward sometimes? It's very similar to asking why somebody wouldn't write their right hand one day and their left hand another. You're always going to have a natural bias towards one side or another, in the same way where if you're falling forward, you're always going to have a natural bias as to which foot would go forward. Sprinters will have a natural bias as to which foot will be forward or which foot will be back in a set of starting blocks. So that's basically what it comes down to. It's not a thing like you get a better training adaptation. It really is down to a natural inclination to one side or another. There's a number of ways you could start figuring that out. How we figured out with youth athletes and kids or people who've never jerked before is you'll put them standing on some sort of a box and you'll push them off it. You'll do that a number of times, ideally when they're not expecting it, and whichever foot gets thrown out in front first will tend to be the kind of foot they'll naturally bias towards. If that doesn't work, or if you have somebody who has been lifting for a number of years and they're using one foot a lot more than the other, you can just kind of tell when somebody is off, you know. They might stagger their stance significantly, and then before they actually split, that can be a sign that they're using the wrong foot. They're unhappy with the foot they're using, and so they kind of have to bias their position in the split or in the dip and drive before they ever go to split. In terms of like physiological response to the split jerk and how people's bodies react to it, the EWF actually funded a study a few years ago where they looked at the cross-sectional area of the quadricep in the front foot and in the back foot. And what you get then is you get around 30% extra muscle tissue in the front foot than you do in the back. So it's not like it it doesn't affect it. It's not like you shouldn't get people to switch it up if they're athletes and they're not concerned with jerking the most weight possible. You're developing an imbalance because you take more weight on the front foot when you do a split jerk. So it's kind of par for the course. It's just what's going to happen. Arm wrestlers are going to be stronger on one arm than they will on the other. Canoeists, if they only row on one side of the boat, will be stronger on one side than they will on the other. And weightlifters, following on from that, will have stronger front legs than they will back legs.
I wonder if there's how often those EWF magazines come out? It's like once
a quarter.
Science. Oh no, so this one really. Most of them are not good. The only good stuff is budgeting, good stuff on them. Jesus. Wondering if you have any more space to one and coaching.
Send us an email.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think we do.
Not another month, maybe.
Yeah.
I would say, if you want to do it, just email us anyway. Send us an email, we'll talk to you. I think we're kind of, there's a lot of people on at this point. We've got a lot of stuff on, so I'm not, maybe, one of us will definitely have space for sure, Abe, but it probably wouldn't be till like October, mid-October, before you get started realistically, if you're not in any rush. We always have space, but just this, it's hard for us to say no to people, to be honest with you. We try to turn people away if there's better options for them, but in terms of one-to-ones, just the next few weeks, it wouldn't be for like another month, I'd say, realistically.
So just get your name on the waiting list anyway.
Yes.
If you're interested, but you certainly won't be able to start in the next week or 2 or 3 weeks.
3 weeks, I'd
say
the earliest would be the week after next before you even get started. If actually, probably even later.
Yeah.
Any promo codes for Snatch and Spot programs? You know what? I'll give you a promo code for students because I think the last live stream we said we'd get a promo code for the live streams just as for people. A lot of people do sign-ons routinely. So there's a very, very old promo code for students, and it's STU15. So capital STU15, and that'll get you the 15% off. So that's like a $5 on most of the programs, maybe a bit more, like 50 in the beginner program or something. So that'd be like a $5. So STU15. So I'm just gonna type that. And we've only ever done one other promo code ever. We did the students at the start. We appreciate students. Appreciate they're coming from. But there you go. Definitely going to take that down after this, though, in the next few hours.
Yeah.
We're probably be gone by Monday because you got rid of the other one we did for the last live stream. How was Malta? Malta was pretty good. This warm weather for warming up is phenomenal. I just don't get people who complain about training in hot weather. I just don't get it. I do not get it. There is almost no negative to training in hot weather other than you just need to drink a bit more water before, and your clothes can't So in Ireland, you get like 2 training sessions out of pants, whereas in other countries, it's like in hot countries, it's like 1 session. That's like the only negative I can think of. In general, warming up is just so much better. The most important thing or the easiest part of warming up, or to make warming up easier, is if you're just warm for a couple of hours beforehand initially. It's just the general environment you're in. 6 hours before training is just warmer. It's like there is as much blood in your extremities as possible, like the 10% extra blood or fucking 15%, and your tendons are a little bit looser and stuff. It's just so much better. Sunshine, general mood. So heat is always a good thing for training. But Malta's nice, warm. It's expensive in stuff. It's very similar price as Ireland, which is very expensive. Ireland is super expensive.
Yeah.
Great food though. Food is very good. Everywhere was good food, which I liked a lot.
OL wants to know if Tyan Tao dropped from 85 to 81 when the weight classes changed, could he outlift Lou's numbers as an 81, 174, 207?
So Tyan Tao was at 77 at one stage, and he was doing like something like 116, maybe like 205, but he was very, very young at that stage. He might have, so he was an 85 and he was doing like 75 and like did he do 217 at Rio with Gabriel? Yeah, that was 217. So maybe if he'd never moved up to 96s, then he definitely could have. But now that he's moved up, you can't really ever go back in, no matter how talented you are. That's just too much to go back to. That would feel so much to him, you know. That would feel like it's such a crazy jump back. If he'd gone from 85s to 81s immediately, I think he could have definitely beat. I'd say he could have definitely beat Lou's clean and jerk. And the snatch probably could have equaled it or gone to 170s pretty consistently. But I don't now. I think it's too late. I think it's too late from now. But I think he could have at the time gone from 85s to 81s and made some go of it.
Gulshan Kumar says,
You skipped Andrew.
Oh, Andrew. Cheers for a great seminar Wednesday. Hope you had a well-deserved pint after. About to have a call with the coach and go through some goal setting. Bring up some of the stuff you covered. Andrew is in sick shape.
Crazy shape.
Great athlete. Andrew, if you ever want to come over to weightlifting and give it a try from not hammer throwing. It's very clearly not hammer throwing.
Discus.
From discus. Thanks very much for coming. It was great to get back in front of some athletes. All right. Gulshar Kumar says, how would you improve max velocity sprinting in an athlete as an S&C coach? I'll take this question in two ways, right? Max velocity sprinting, do you want to be fast or at sprinting? Or are you actually concerned with the max velocity phase of a sprinter?
I assume it's max velocity. It's a very specific question. Since you want to be a better sprinter, it's max velocity.
So what you're looking at then in your case is there's three things are very important in the maximum velocity phase. First is a rate of stride. So how many strides you're taking per minute, per second, whatever it is. The next thing is the length of that stride. And then the last thing is how well you can maintain that stride during your maximum velocity phase. Most of the time, you don't make significant changes to a maximum velocity phase. You just elongate the time the time you can be within that phase. So, say in the middle of a sprint, you might have 30 meters of a 100-meter sprint or 20 meters of a 100-meter sprint being the maximum velocity phase. If you could bring that from 20 to 25 or 30 to 35 meters, you're obviously going to have a much faster sprint. So that's a lot of that becomes work capacity stuff. Now in developing sprinters, in youth sprinters, because you've changed the morphology, you might alter their sprinting technique, which will increase the rate of the stride, increase the length of those strides, which will alter your maximal velocity phase. But for a lot of people, you're looking at strength and capacity to maintain that maximum velocity phase and not actually changing it a huge amount. Strength is the number one limiter of speed. It's the only thing that really limits the actual maximum velocity you can get to. So if you have good capacity, if you have good acceleration phases, then it's down to actual raw strength for being able to bump up that maximum velocity. So more longer steps faster.
So this is related to what you're saying. So there's a thing called inertial coupling, right? And it's how the tibialis anterior is involved in basically sprinting through inertial coupling. So it's thing about mechanics where it's like basically every muscle is involved in every joint movement, basically, like whether you think about it or not. You know, it's quite interesting. So
it really depends on the level of experience as well, because if you get somebody who's kind of ran a bit, they've played a bit of sport, they might have even played sport professionally and they want to try sprinting and they want to become better at sprinting, it's a very easy game, you know. You improve their efficiency, improve their actual sprint technique, you bring up all the kind of boats, so acceleration work gets a bit better, their actual stride gets a bit better, their actual capacity to maintain the stride gets a bit better, and then it's a lot easier. If it's a really experienced sprinter and they're really naturally talented, they're already running fast times, you're probably going to have to do like a real-time biomechanical analysis. So whether that's a camera on a track running at the same speed as them and videoing them as they're running, or whether they're on something like a Woodward treadmill where they're running in a fairly realistic environment, you'd probably be down to biomechanical analysis at that point.
I think, you know, with sprinting, I think it's the most exposed by natural talent as opposed to any other sports. It's the most because the variables are really small in sprinting. Like it's straight and fast, you know. So it's not like rugby, it's not like badminton, it's not like weightlifting in some regards. You know, in really fast, short, explosive events, obviously the margin for just variables gets really, really small, you know. So I think you'd see, like, we've seen videos like Johan Blake and, you know, Usain Bolt's doing gym stuff, and my God, it's not good. So you can definitely get faster as anyone can get faster at sprinting. Now, it's just relevance to world records, you know, is how much it will help. Like, so strength will make everyone faster, but it's a lot of them I think are in spite of rather than because of, you know, with that gym training. Like, it just really exposes you to, really exposes their natural talent at sprinting, you know, because you see like the muscle composition of like Johan Blake, for example. I think he's probably, or like Harry Akins. I know Harry Akins isn't, he's a world class sprinter, but he's not
elite.
He's an elite sprinter, but he's not maybe like a world beater, of course, you know. But like their natural propensity for just strength is really exposed in sprinting. Now, that's obviously not saying that you shouldn't try to get faster. I'm just saying it's kind of an interesting point with sprinting. I think it always kind of shows, or like max jumping and stuff, you know.
Yeah, vertical jump is the exact same.
Yeah, like you can.
You basically don't improve it.
Yeah, it's funny because like good can get better and like shit can get to slightly less shit, you know, but you can't take it to whole new levels, you know.
It's like weightlifting is a kind of unique sport where a lot of people with a lot of different genetic talent tend to get good at it, you know. You people who don't have huge expression of fast twitch fibers, along with like the super elite who do, but still a lot of people get very, very good at it. And you get people with different morphology and different lever lengths get good at weightlifting. Nobody gets good at nobody gets to Olympic level sprinting without being the top 0.1 of 0.1%.
I think that's the beauty of weightlifting, though, is that you've more ways around. There's more than one way to skin the cat. Whereas with running, like, it's like fast legs, basically. You just move fast, like, and there's no, you can't manipulate the distance, you can't really manipulate your shoes, you can't manipulate realistically, it's one foot in front of the other. Whereas weightlifting, there's a lot of options realistically. And I know, like, Usain Bolt had like an odd stride length, or kind of stride gait or whatever, you know. But I think with sprinting and stuff, it's interesting. Now, obviously, Gulshan can obviously get faster, and that's not a comment, really, just some idle thoughts about that. I was talking about that.
Last thing on sprinting is sprinters are all moving towards one point, right? So it's a convergent path for sprinters. They used to think you wanted like is it the Vesuvian man, where like, in fact, all sprinters are getting taller and getting longer legs. That's what everything is moving towards. And so there's this interesting thing where it hasn't happened in female sprinting yet. It's actually a lecturer in UL, or a PhD student in UL was looking at it. It just so happens that things that matter in sprinting are stride length, the power you can produce, and like the frequency of those strides then, right? So obviously longer, bigger people, when they have the correct expression of muscle fiber types, they have everything else that's right. Someone who's longer is going to be better at it. It's just the way it is. Somebody who's bigger is going to be able to lift more weights. Somebody who is shorter and thinner is going to be able to run long distances better. That expression hasn't come out in female sprinting yet, and they think it's because the talent pool isn't big enough yet, and they haven't had enough people through yet.
Okay. It's interesting we haven't seen another name in weightlifting, drugs or no drugs. Like, we just haven't seen someone come along who's just teeny tiny, very arms and legs the same length as their torso, basically. And it's just weird we haven't seen that again since in the last 20, 30, 40. Like, we've seen we've seen like one or two lifters who've had really long torsos with super short arms. There's like a Kazakhstan dude. We've seen some of the Koreans similar to him, but we see no one that names morphology again, which is very interesting. And then we see someone like Lasher come along, who's the second best weightlifter ever, and he's of such the opposite in the field. So obviously, then, like, the weight classes change things so much, you know. So it's doesn't have to. Jody G, full stop, period. Do you guys think that athletes should have a strength-based exercise like the squat and deadlift before starting to do Olympic lift variations and plyometrics? So the answer is yes, but then for you it's no. So, like, unfortunately, like, for you, so before you do the Olympic lifts, Jody, I would imagine you're obviously an adult. you're typing on YouTube, so you can assume that you're maybe not a 12-year-old entering an elite system. So for you as an adult, you unfortunately don't have the time realistically, and don't actually even need to a certain extent, do strength training before the Olympic lift variations. So if you look at like national training systems, or very good national training systems, they would still let them do the snatch, clean, jerk, but they spend a lot of time just like squatting and pulling and deadlifting and building up that strength stuff while practicing the lifts. So it's degrees of variation between those two of what you should be doing first. So you can go do the lifts, but you need to be very, very smart about it before plyometrics. However, you would definitely need some form of strength bases before that, specifically squatting. Deadlifting, not so much. Squatting, the recommendation is usually close to a double bodyweight squat or on top of a double bodyweight squat before you start doing plyometrics, And I think probably the interesting thing about that as well, if talking about kind of genetics in terms of plyometric sports. So like, you'd be like, if you got a super talented athlete come in, say a very, very talented athlete in weightlifter, and they just do jumping, they don't get injured. And you're like, why can you do that? Whereas like 37-year-old Nicholas from accounting and PwC can't start doing that, But the likelihood is that the very talented athlete who comes into the sport probably already has that double body weight back up before he even starts weightlifting, or like you'll have it in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So I would definitely be comfortable realistically. We know nothing about Jody, so you might not even be able to get to a double bodyweight squat within the next 5 years or something like that. So do you really want to, use up 5 years of that? You could be 17 or 18, which might be fine, but for you, I would say just make sure you're competent in basic strength movements. Make sure you can at least a 1.2 bodyweight squat for the Olympic lift, I would say first. Make sure you have good mobility. Start practicing very, very light, but make sure you're getting a bit stronger. For the plyometrics, I would say, unless you have a very, very good reason why you want to do plyometrics, I would say then probably leave it off for a while. I'd say you're just risking more rather than gaining more realistically. Unless, for example, so you're saying, do you think athletes should have a strength base? Okay, so no, athletes are a funny one like that because they are talented, I would say, but even still, you prefer your athletes to have a strength base.
There's only two cases,
yeah,
in my opinion. You've kind of alluded to both of them. The first case is like your 10-year-old. So any athlete under the age of 12 or 13, so any prepubescent athlete, I prefer them to have a strength base and some sort of athletic base before they start doing snatches and clean and jerks. The only other case is a cripplingly weak and light individual who can't become a bar. In every other case, so even in both of those cases, they don't do plyometrics first. They'll obviously do strength training first so they can pick up and move around the barbell. In all other cases, it's going to be more beneficial for you to do snatches and clean and jerks to get better at snatches and clean and jerks. The cripplingly weak individuals, you definitely see them. They're probably the 5%. The youth athletes who are very young are probably the 3%. And then 92% of everybody else, or maybe even more, would just be better off doing snatches, clean and jerks, squats, pulls, and getting better at weightlifting through doing weightlifting training, like standard, normal, intelligent, not Bulgarian weightlifting training would make almost everyone better. Yeah, and certainly I've come across people in both of those cohorts who needed to go away and do some strength training first. But if you're watching YouTube videos about strength training, you're probably not going to be that cripplingly weak.
You do see kids can do plyometric stuff because they would probably have like, they might be like 30 kilos,
yeah.
So like they can probably squat something, but also their joints are a lot more lax. Their tendons are far more flexible, so they can deal with the kind of general hubbub of being a hyperactive kid. I
would say almost no adults should be doing plyometrics to get better at weightlifting, because most adults will have issues with ankle mobility and knee mobility, like knee stiffness and ankle stiffness. And plyometrics trains that in the opposite direction of where you want to go.
John Burkhardt says, thanks. How do you correct imbalances associated with split jerks? You wouldn't really just go for an imbalance because of split jerks. You would just do your general unilateral work from side to side, as you should be doing in training anyway, fairly routinely, like with 1 to 2 times frequency per week. I wouldn't try and pursue some arbitrary numbers on your split squat, for example, or your single leg Bulgarian squats or something for your split jerk. I wouldn't worry about it that way. Maybe if you were an athlete doing some split jerks, I would just have a little bit more unilateral work, but that would be probably because you would be doing that anyway, hopefully in your S&C program, rather than trying to correct the imbalances. You probably, even if you're an athlete then, you're probably not even doing enough split jerks to realistically make a difference. And that's something I'd worry about, to be honest.
Yeah, with athletes, you can just change them to do split jerks, right leg, left leg.
Yes.
Also, the imbalance is there for a reason. The imbalance is there because that leg needs to be stronger. So, like, you don't cut off all your callus, or you don't want to lose that muscle tissue. Obviously, not all imbalances are great, but not all imbalances are bad either. You know, like you're going to have some sort of inherent imbalance from side to side anyway. Okay, Larkin Halton.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at Larkin.
All right.
Yeah, in a former lifetime. Saying, having some internal rotation issues and squatting feels like tendonitis in the triple attachment area. Now, I think Larkin is referring to the triple attachment area as being like the attachment area on the medial side of your upper leg.
Mm-hmm.
But what would be the best way to rehab it? The best way, Larkin, and it's funny you're asking us this because you're a physical therapist, would be to go to a qualified healthcare practitioner. In general, don't do anything that aggravates it. That kind of cover all blanket rule is we don't give injury advice or rehab advice, even if it's stuff we've dealt with ourselves.
Where'd you work at Larkin?
In COS.
Oh.
I assume it's the same Larkin. But that is the kind of blanket statement. We don't get into it because we don't want to draw a load of legal hassle on ourselves. But you could just text me as well and I'll give you that advice.
Morning Dawn says, if I've had to be off in the gym for a week, any idea how much strength I would lose and whether I should go back to where I was or regress my training by a week for more my lifts? So if it is a snatch, clean, jerk, you'll probably have...
Oh, you lose all of it.
You'll lose all of it.
You'll never have it again.
No, you'll be fine for a week off from the gym. Realistically, what we'd usually recommend is just restart the week you finished on. In most cases, specifically a powerlifting. Well, like, to be honest, with powerlifting, you could almost certainly probably continue to the next week without any issue, or maybe drop things down by like 5%, so your squat, bench, deadlift for strength training. For weightlifting, if I would say was the week off because of an injury, then of course there's different reasons. It might take a lot longer to go back into shape. If it wasn't, then your weightlifting, you're probably fine just to restart the previous week, and you should be fine to continue on from there.
Jeremy P wants to know, how about a squat technique video? Go and look at a front squat technique video from last week. That's up on our YouTube. And there's a new one coming out this week, part 2.
What are you doing part 2?
Part 2 is just showing real world examples. So we showed like the non-ideal front squat technique. Then we have some very, very ideal front squat techniques. We just look at the differences between the two and how you might want to kind of bring in one or two things that the good people are doing, and then watch out if you're doing some of the bad things.
We're also going to do a video, probably after we come back from Romania, maybe we might record this in Romania, on the mid-bar technique position, the hybrid bar. So that'd be a good one as well.
Just there was a fly flying around there, by the way. I'm sure anyone thought.
No, I'm sure there was. Yeah.
Swatting the air.
Jazz Kramachu, nailed it. I've had I can't do the question though. I've had knee pain for a while. One day my rib got really painful and shots.
Just no injury questions, lads.
Joseph Falcon says, is it important to manage low during hypertrophy block, for example, during PPL? During PPL, push-pull legs?
No,
I feel like that might be push-pull legs, yeah. Should somebody take a deal every 4 weeks or so? So I suppose, Joseph, in terms of like load, when you mean load, do you mean, when you say load to me, what I'm thinking is the actual weight or your total volume or total tonnage or total intensity, like the weights on the bars. When you say load to me, I assume you mean just the entire load in your training. I think it was an article in Journal Strength Conditioning about this recently about why there's no definite term for load. But when you say load to me, I mean like, what I immediately thought of was like, do you think you should be increasing the weights each one? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So even for hypertrophy and strength, you still need to be increasing the weights. You need to be progressing through that. A deload every 4 weeks or so. What we usually recommend for this is, if you feel like you need to take one, but it's not great to be taking deload weeks in inappropriate places. So if you're on like an 8-week progression, for example, and you take a deload on like week 4 between 5, it's not bad. It mostly doesn't cause any issues, but you can kind of end up wasting a lot of time. Sometimes you can kind of ruin your momentum a little bit. I feel 4 weeks is too much, but it will definitely work well. So every 4 weeks will almost certainly do what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a spectrum of very, very safe and very, very not safe, I put deloading every 4 weeks here. So it's nice and safe. It puts you in a great position. You'll always dissipate the fatigue. You'll almost certainly help avoid injuries from overtraining or overload. But I think you'll just end up wasting a lot of weeks over the course of the year. And I think it's so many weeks that it might have a mild negative impact, I think.
Yeah. We talk about like the perfect tool for the job a lot, right? So what's the most effective training program, efficient use of your time? And we talk about it in the case of like surgeon's scalpel versus a sledgehammer, you know. In the case of like power building or power lifting, I think every 4 weeks is just a bit too much. Like when you look at
maybe not with hypertrophy.
I think so.
I don't think with hypertrophy it is.
I think 10 weeks. Because if you're having to go every 4 weeks, you're probably just pushing it too hard. And like hypertrophy training isn't about the training itself. Hypertrophy training is about the recovery from training.
So in these cases, he's asking specifically for hypertrophy, right? So I actually think every 4 weeks would be good, because in hypertrophy you can make bigger jumps because they're so low compared to your absolute intensity. So if you're doing like 4x10s and you're finishing on 4x8s, you know, so you've like 2 weeks of 10s and 2 weeks of 8s, for example, you can really push the relative intensity, you know, the burn, the pump, you know, and you can make that last week tough and then reset again. But
it does all come down to as well, whether you talk about load as in load with intensity or load as in load with volume intensity.
I think that's what he's talking about, because then he's asking me about deload every 4 weeks. So I would say for hypertrophy, I think you could certainly make effective 4-week training blocks. I don't think you could go much long. See, hypertrophy is a little bit weird because it also depends then on your calories you're consuming and what you're doing in training. So if you, for example, are going from 90 to 95 kilos body weight and you did that over the course of 2 months, you could probably only you'd fit probably one deload in there, but you might it wouldn't even be deload, so it'd be like a step down a little bit. So you'd start at this point, you deload to like, you bump up to S up here and you download just a little bit here and then wave up again for that kind of that 8-week block. But would I ever, for example, go up here and then back down here again in the middle of hypertrophy if you're eating 4,000 calories a day? No, that'd be a waste of a week. If then, for example, if you're doing a hypertrophy phase during a cut, then you will have much smaller amplitudes of increases in load, I suppose, if we're talking about like training volume plus your intensity, for example, your overall training load, then you will probably have everything will be slightly less anyway, so you probably won't be taking a very aggressive absolute deload then, just in the context of hypertrophy.
Just in the context, but I still think 4 weeks is too often.
I think you could make it work really well.
You could.
Yeah, but you don't have to.
But you don't have to.
If this was, for example, weightlifting, we really see with weightlifters, like, if you might get to 4.5 weeks and things go like, for most amateur weightlifters now, you can get to like 4.5 weeks, and then maybe like the 5th day of that week before weightlifters be like, I'm so tired.
I think I really like people to go very far into the trough.
Yes.
I like it to be noticeable in someone's training that they need a deload. And that's what I think is best.
That's what you see in weightlifting, I found.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm really tired.
It's very clear. It's very obvious to everyone involved. Coach, athlete.
Yes.
Very clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
But for hypertrophy, I think you'll just have to...
Do you even need it?
Yes.
I don't think you do. Like, hypertrophy training is... If it's planned well, I don't think you would need a deload. If it's planned well.
I think what you could probably do, or what you probably want to do, is you're probably going to be maybe sick of those exercises after 4 weeks if you're keeping if you're doing like the same stuff, I think you'd probably want to change them. And so realistically, you'll end up with obviously the correct thing, the smart thing to do there would be end up with like getting back to a start of those. So if you're doing like, I don't know, RDLs, and then you're like, I'm fucking sick of RDLs.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do like deficit stiff-legged deadlifts. You're not going to, the weights aren't going to be in any way the same. And so you need to start a new progression then for those, So I would say how I would imagine it, if I was thinking about hypertrophy block, it would be 4 weeks of some exercises and then change again, and 4 weeks of new exercises.
And then that becomes a deload by proxy.
Yeah.
Because you're not immediately going to be able to get high intensity in a new exercise. Yeah, that makes sense. I think people are just, and this is nothing against, is it Joseph Falcon? This is nothing against you, Joseph. This is just something we come up against very regularly. And I think in general, people are a bit soft on themselves. They'll go really, really hard in certain points and they'll fuck up their training that way. But it's very rarely that they do too long of consistent training, long enough where they fuck their training up.
Like what's going to happen to a natural bodybuilder who goes too far into the red for hypertrophy training?
Nothing.
Maybe
they'll just overtrain. They won't get the positive adaptation in terms of hypertrophy because they won't be able to recover. But if it's well planned and you're well recovered,
like the only thing I would see happening is tendon issues, maybe on like the bigger lifts, and primarily like maybe in the knee stuff. But realistically, you're not going to that high frequency and on hypertrophy stuff.
Okay, getting away from that. Nira wants a ring gymnastics reaction video. We should definitely do that. Eve Ortiz 87 says week 8 of your back squat program next week. Very excited to see what you can do. We're very excited too. Hopefully it's like 25 kilos, 30 kilos. That'd be great. Tiago Franco says, hey lads, hope you're doing well. Any tips on how to correct feet kickback in the snatch? Yes.
Go for it.
Do you want me to go first?
Go for it.
Feet kickback in the snatch are like the donkey kick. So basically like pulling your heels into your ass and stamping down. That's what I'm assuming you're referring to as this. In my opinion, is caused by people leaning back too far. And then this foot movement. So if you think about this is a straight up human being, if they're leaning back too far, that level of flexion in their knees tends to just stay. So they have a small bit more knee flexion. Then when you go to move your foot, the natural reaction is to pull your heel into your ass and stamp your foot down on the ground. I think when you get people more towards a vertical extension and they vertically extend with a flat foot, getting them to think about extending on a flat foot and moving that flat foot out tends to be the best way of getting rid of the donkey kick. So yeah, in my opinion or my experience, a lot of the time it's people throwing their shoulders and head back a lot at the top, probably making too much contact at the top, and that's what's causing the massive donkey kick.
What size ant is you? Someone just reminded me there.
10.
10.
Okay.
For your antas.
Any update on the video for the antas? Yes. Kerf is DMing them right now.
They messaged me, the guys from workout. You messaged me the other day and I forgot that. Monday, fuck, today's Saturday. Holy shit. Yeah.
Okay. Dark Material, what a name. You spoke before how much you dislike powerlifting training. Why is that?
Wait, you skipped.
Did I?
You skipped a load of things. So, is it possible to run the basketball program maintenance and your beginner weighting program, or should you strictly just go to the beginner? Yeah. Don't forget, because the back squats are quite light for a few weeks anyway in the maintenance program. It will get heavy towards the end of 12 weeks, but you don't need to worry about that. Just go straight to the beginner program for sure.
Okay. Any update on the video review? Obviously, Gertrude's just hopefully we'll have those shoes soon.
Week after next.
For
sure. Because we already know what they're like and stuff. But
Dark Material said you've spoken about how much you dislike powerlifting training. Why is that?
Whoa.
Where are you?
Maybe contemporary part. Oh, you mean as in personally?
Yeah. If you're referring to me, I fucking hated powerlifting training.
The same way I would hate to throw darts for a living. Just don't enjoy it.
Just not the sport I wanted to do. And I was kind of doing it because I was like, fuck it, I'll just do something different. And I was coaching a lot of powerlifters. So it's like, I'll go to a competition. To be honest, it was just like, it was the wrong horse for the wrong course.
Yeah. I could see myself doing it in my like 40s maybe, and being like mildly happy to bench like 180 or something. But like,
yeah. For me, it was just like training the things about myself I didn't really want to train, you know?
Yes.
Like outside of work and coaching people and all that, one of the main things I spend most of my time on is shooting, and it's being heavier and slower and having worse cardiovascular fitness and just being really, really slow and tired all the time and fatigued, which is realistically what you're going to do most of the time. Your powerlifting is you're going to be fatigued, broken down, trying to gain muscle and gain, and it's terrible for that.
Some ringing you.
No.
Who's Wi-Fi next to?
Well,
You sure?
Sure am.
Ivor tits. Yes, you can take a week off for you on the maintenance for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Karoro Taichu says leg press sled versus front squats versus Zercher squats. If I can
Leg press sled is like the leg press machine, you know, where you push your sled up and down the thing.
Okay. If I can't get back to the back squat due to a shoulder injury, or are there any variants you'd recommend? For sure, the front squats. Why would you have? I suppose I couldn't see how you could do front squats efficiently if you have a shoulder injury stopping you fully from doing back squats. I'd probably look at safety bar squats before I'd be looking at front squats, just because you keep the load pretty high and you can keep it in a position where you could probably you get more out of it in the end. But then it'd be front squats. It would never be Zercher squats.
Never.
And then a leg press would be like the third option there too. Those. So
I supersede your front squats and raise you belt squats.
Oh yeah, belt squat. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. Fuck. If you can do belt squats are number one. Then it'd be safety squats probably. Mm-hmm. Then front squats. Then leg press. And then finally,
Zercher squats are horrendous for everything and everyone. They don't make you better at anything. That's my 2 cents on that.
Does growing facial hair increase squat strength? I'm sure it must. Started snatch grip deadlifting. Got a little long leg. Starting position is quite narrow. The starting position is really hard on my hips. Should I just stick with it and hope my body gets used to it? I would say if you're just a powerlifter and you're just doing snatch grip deadlifts for a reason, I would first of all look at why is it hurting your hips. That sounds kind of strange. And then I would say if you can't figure out why it's hurting your hips, nothing else is hurting your hips, and you're not having an injury at your hips or anywhere else of that, I would say just don't bother doing snatch grip deadlifts. I'd say, oh, it's not worth the hassle. But I would be just concerned why is snatch grip deadlifting hurting your hips? Because it's not really something that's incredibly hip exposing or hip dominant in some ways. No. So that would just concern me from that point of view if I was doing it myself.
Animesh Unial says, I'm new to this channel, started coming up my feed nowadays. That is great to hear.
Phenomenal.
Great to hear. The little algorithm elves are pulling in our direction. Watch a few videos of yours. Can you tell me if you have paid online programs as well? Yeah, we do. So we have programs for weightlifters, powerlifters, off-season athletes, CrossFitters, new weightlifters who haven't trained before, weightlifters getting back into training. Then we have a squat program, a deadlift program, and a press program. You can buy those all from our website, seekastrength.com. Most of them work out at around 30 to 35 euro per month. And then we also have specialty programs for like combat athletes and stuff like that. With all of those programs, you get access to our members page where twice a week you get to put in your videos or your questions into a little live stream similar to this with myself and Owen, but it's just for the members and you get all your coaching through there.
He just wants bigger traps. He can stand straps. That's why I started snatch grip deadlifting. Yeah, I would say just there's better things you can. Well, not better things you can do for traps, but
I like a mid grip.
Yeah,
little shruggy.
Think he's on the ring.
So deadlift with a bit of a shrug at the top.
Darius says, "Have you noticed most elite lifters have no armpit hair? I used to shave my armpits as well as singers.
No way.
It's just too weird. Like most people would. Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want a big fucking length of hair coming out. Just a little bit, like you don't need to wax it, like, but
you just trim it back.
Yeah, I used to do it a bit too. It's just a bit aggressive, like.
Yeah.
There's just no need for it, like it's just.
Yeah, I suppose.
I would imagine a lot of people might do that as well, maybe. Also, some people just might not have hairy armpits. Maybe. Yeah, it's possible. Although people like Rosalind Nurdinov, He's hair everywhere. He's hair in his back, like. Peter, oh my God, lol. Peter.
No, you missed Timmy O'Reilly.
What's Timmy O'Reilly say?
Says, if you can fail to complete allocated reps in your set, do you drop down the weight? It really depends on how much and how badly you failed it. If you do like 5x5 and you do 1 to 4 sets perfectly with 5 reps on all of them, and then you get like 3 reps in and then fail your 4th on the last one, you obviously don't drop down. Whereas if you do like 3 reps, 2 reps, 2 reps, 1 rep, then you've obviously fucked up and you need to drop the weight. So it really does depend how much you've done. If you've done like over 80% of the total load, then you probably don't need to drop down the weight. Piotrek.
Oh my God.
Omlegal.
I'm saying, oh my God, lol. That's what I thought of.
OMG lol.
OMG lol.
Oh my God, that is.
Oh my God,
OMGL.
It could also be second name. So, where are we going?
How to brace scapulas, upper back in the ollie lifts. In the deadlift, external rotation of shoulders was recommended to me, but wouldn't internal rotation help for pulling under the bar? You want no internal or no external rotation. So if you think anatomical positions are usually this, so that's fully externally rotated with our hands down. We don't want to be internally rotated where our thumbs will point back into us. You want normal levels. So that would be thumb, like if you had your thumb stuck out, it would run along the level of the bar. You obviously just wrap your thumb in then and your knuckles point straight down and your elbow runs concurrently to that. So that would be elbow folding straight up when you pull in. You then just bring that down by your side. You don't externally rotate it. You certainly don't internally rotate it. You just have a neutral position with your scapulas pulled together.
So next we have...
Okay, so and in other words, how does bracing differ for the clean pull and the deadlift? In my opinion, the bracing happens, or the difference happens mainly from the hips and below the hips, and that upper back position doesn't really change. Stronger deadlifters can round forward a small bit, so it just cuts the total distance of the pull by maybe 2 inches maximum. But in terms of like ideal positions, they don't change hugely. Your hips would just be higher and your knees would be in a different position, but the upper back and certainly the scapulas will be in just as braced a position for both.
Chris Dance says, getting more muscular and powerful legs versus being lighter to make use of tendon springiness for jumping ? Hyphen, that Stephen Home jumper guy I showed you had a trash vertical and squat. So I would say in terms of like people like Stephen Home, this is kind of just someone who's a freak of nature. I'd say realistically, for most people, if you're not a freak of nature, and you'll probably know if you're a freak of nature, being more muscular and powerful legs and also being lighter instead of versus is your best option. So the happiest medium for you. We couldn't really give you a number on what your body weight should be, but of course being lighter is better for sure. Without a shadow of a doubt for plyometrics, being lighter is certainly better. However, everyone has a kind of a certain point where if they drop below that, their strength really takes a nosedive in terms of like what they're used to, what their leverages got used to and stuff like that. So I'd say you'll have to find the happy medium. You know, that comes down to a bit of nuance for yourself and figuring out what works best for you. So being really strong and powerful, but lighter is the answer there. So kind of a shady answer, but try to do both rather than saying, I'm going to be really light. So you want to be light and strong. There's no reason you can't try to be strong and light, you know. It just won't be a crazy absolute strength.
In a very similar question, or a question along the same lines, Martina Hindebrandt says, hi, it's Martina from the seminar. Hi, Martina. Thanks for tuning in. How do you decide on the best body weight for weightlifting stroke competition? This is very much a game of, for you yourself, it's a game of experimentation. So you want to slowly build up and you'll get to the point where you're like, okay, this is too much now. I'm too big. You'll definitely notice the point where, say if you're a 49 kilo lifter and you go up to 52 kilos, you'll notice those strength numbers keep going up and your lift will keep feeling better. You will then get to a point of stagnation, whether that's going from 50 to 55, 60 to 65, 70, 75. You'll notice a point of stagnation whereby you don't get any increase in effectiveness or in strength or in stability with the increase in body weight. So that's for you, that's kind of where you go, right? And get as strong as possible at a certain body weight. If you then want to increase, you can go up, see if you notice a big difference. If you don't, drop back down. If you want to be lighter, you can drop down slowly and incrementally and just keep an eye on it. Say, am I getting a lot weaker, or do I feel the same, or do I feel better now because I can hit positions better? So it is a thing of personal experimentation. I think as coaches, because you just experience it with a lot of people very, very frequently, you can tend to see in an athlete where either the weight is holding them back, so they need to add more weight to become stronger, or else on the opposite end of things, they might be a more effective athlete at a slightly lighter body weight. So it's something you can work with your coach with if your coach has seen you over a number of years, but it's also something that you're just going to have to play around with and gain experience with. Vegan Gain says he got the Reebok Legacy 2s based on our recommendations, and they're vegan. The raised heel has taken pressure off his groin, and now he can squat again after the adductor tear. That's great news.
Absolutely. Any advice or tips on gaining confidence in the bar for snatch jerks at around a 1RM? So this comes down to ability, momentum in training, and then belief that you can make those, which also come from ability and momentum in training. So the tips are very basic, but enacting those tips can be, it's a matter of great coaching, good athlete, a good environment, So tips are very, very simple, but doing it is a matter of good training, consistency, smart pre-performance routine, sensible and simple cueing of yourself to formulate good technique, being powerful, attempting maxes when you're ready to attempt maxes as opposed to attempting maxes just when you want to do them. There's a lot of things that would go into that, but I would say you need to build up to it, build momentum to it, attempt closer weights to them frequently enough, which again is just good programming then, good coaching, and having consistent and usable technique at heavy weights. So there's a lot to it. They're the main tips for me.
As like sports psychologists go, there are definitely things you can do with athletes when they're getting performance anxiety around certain things. In the case of weightlifting and in terms of carrying heavier weights, so most of the time that's not what's needed. So you don't need an acute intervention in terms of like there's performance anxiety around this one thing. A lot of the time, as Gareth said, what you need is to build momentum in a certain direction. And it's not necessarily a thing that you're going to be like trying to just get over one particular experience or a host of experiences that made you nervous. In weightlifting, a lot of the time you're being limited by the subconscious and a kind of a non-conscious understanding of your own abilities. So momentum is the best way to get there.
Next we have gymnastics progressions for upper body strength and weightlifting, good or bad combination. I would say they're certainly a good combination.
Yeah, great combination.
Yeah, if you have the time, the ability, and the skill and the knowledge to do the gymnastics progressions in a reasonable and effectively loaded manner, then it'll be a phenomenal combination for sure.
Okay, so that is Lorca worked it. But some name in Russian that I don't know how to read says, does wrist size affect strength and weightlifting strength? Wrist size doesn't affect anything. But on an interesting note, wrist size is often used as a talent ID factor for how strong or how high a testosterone someone or how relatively high someone's testosterone levels are going to be.
Jesus Christ.
So when you look at,
no wonder,
when you look at talent ID systems, they look in children, they look at jaw width, so jaw thickness of the jaw, and they look at that as a ratio of thickness to the wrist. And they also use like hand size measures and things like that. The thing is, a lot of the time, you will get somebody with those thick-wristed, heavy-jawed people will also go into kind of more physical upbringings. So they're playing sport, they're involved in farming, they're involved in physical labor younger in life, and that gives them thicker wrists, thicker knees, thicker ankles, all of those good things.
Tic-tac.
What that?
Tic-tac-toe, like?
Tic-tac-toe.
Yeah.
So it doesn't affect weightlifting strength per se, but it is a good indicator. The other thing when you look at wrist size is people with very, very thin wrists and flimsy wrists do tend to get wrist injuries due to overuse because they just don't have the same amount of tissue in your wrist that other people might have. So they might need to spend more time strengthening their wrists, strengthening their forearm, increasing proprioception in the arms and shoulders So they're in a very stable position overhead, so those wrists don't get kind of jarred around and annoyed by weightlifting volume. If you're a thinned wrist person, I would say never, ever, ever don't even buy a pair of wrist straps. That's the worst thing you could possibly do.
I'd say as well as if you have thin wrists, it's unlikely you're less probably likely to have bigger hands, and bigger hands are always better for weightlifting.
Always better.
Longer, bigger hands are just a huge advantage in weightlifting, especially for competitive weightlifting when you have to wear, or you can't wear straps. Interesting question though.
For the last 5 minutes, will we pick random questions, or do you want to go for the next question next?
We go for another few minutes.
Yeah.
There's another good few questions. You mentioned the mental fatigue of hype yourself up for a lift. Thanks a lot. I think Cam is asking about the mental fatigue from hyping yourself up for max lifts. I think the psychological recovery is hugely, and Fitz will probably clear this a bit more, it's probably hugely based on the individual lifter. Some people will just be able to do lots of max lifts and zero problem. For the vast majority of people, or most people, the physiology will affect your psychology. So if you start feeling like shit, it'll make you less likely to be more enthused about attaining more max lifts. So obviously your hormones, inflammation levels, everything is intrinsically related there. So the likelihood is that it will begin to negatively affect your mood. So if you wake up like shit in the morning, unless you are, with people like an Aaron Kroll versus who's a bitch?
You could say any American weightlifter, Bandy.
Did you say that? Oh, I can't believe you said that. Jesus Christ. So it's like an Aaron Kroll versus someone who is, someone who's mentally not very weak. Someone like Aaron will have the tenacity or the mindset to attempt more heavier weights. So it depends on the person as well. So some people, despite their physiology, will still have that tenacity in them. So I think that's probably kind of the combination of that.
In my opinion, in terms of mental fatigue, people make the mistake of saying, oh, it hyped me up. Like getting hyped up for a competition was more mentally fatiguing than it was physically fatiguing. Stress, anxiety, all of those things are just a simple hormone of cascade of hormones. And those hormones are identical for physical stress as they are for psychological stress. So the feeling of physiological stress, although it might come about through DOMS or any of those things, is from having heightened cortisol levels, and they don't fall into two different silos, So although we might need different things to recover physiologically than we do psychologically, those things are exactly the same. So it's not this thing of like the psychological thing could be down to host of different factors, such as like environmental factors or lifestyle factors, and the training or the physical fatigue is probably only down to training load or what we're doing in training. But the overall level of stress we have in our system, it all feeds into that one silo. It all comes through the same pipe. So even though Ivan might be feeling like, oh, I feel physically very good, but I'm mentally really, really fatigued, those two things are the same. They're kissing cousins, as one might say.
Jamal says, I have ditched kettlebells after your advice. Good. When MMA in mind, I'm currently hang cleaning and push pressing. Are snatches worth my time given it such a high skill movement? I would say probably hold off on the snatches for another while. But what I would probably do for you, Jamal, is I would start doing some overhead squats once a week. I think you get a lot of benefits those for a fighter, especially in terms of your shoulder, range of motion, and stability. So I would definitely just add in some overhead squats with a barbell, preferably with weighting shoes if you have those. If not, try to get no cheap pair of them. And overhead squats once a week for like sets of 3 to 5 reps at very, 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 very manageable weight would be something I would look at before doing snatches.
You didn't take that in order, did you?
No.
Picked it. Okay. Eric L says, are you guys familiar with the 13-week small ab squat program? My squat's about 60 kilos behind my deadlift, so 185. So I started the program recently. I was wondering your thoughts on it. Probably too aggressive. Unless you're geared out of your tree, but you're probably not. It's probably just a bit too much. You'd be better off just doing something a lot more conservative. 2 days a week is probably ideal for it. Not to be pushing your own program. The squat program would be better for you. Seek a Strength Road to Anywhere squat program. People often see like the bigger their discrepancy, the more aggression and the quicker they want to fix it with. So they'll throw everything at it. They'll throw more at it because it's such a weakness or it's such a discrepancy from their deadlift or whatever. In fact, you need to do the opposite. So if you have a massive difference in your squat and your deadlift, you need to go slowly into building up your squat. You don't suddenly throw everything on fire and say like, oh, this is going to fix it. You need to slowly bring about changes, not really aggressively bring about changes. Like there's a massive difference for a reason, and you're probably just going to aggravate something or break yourself down a bit too much.
Alvin says, if I can only fit one snatch pull in my program, what would you recommend? Panda style or to the belly button? Just a normal snatch pull.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any good weightlifters I know use panda pulls really. Just do normal pulls. I could see for an amateur weightlifter for sure, panda pulls give you some very, very bad habits. So I would say just stick with normal snatch pulls.
Nathan Spence said, I had to drop the hook grip when resuming training after COVID because of small hand syndrome. Wrist of a child hurt after 100 kilos. I would say, especially people with small hands, unless your hand is so inhibitively small that you cannot hook grip or you can barely hook grip it. But if you can get any sort of traction on the thumb at all, that's going to be so much better than the feeling of having a good grip with a full grip.
Yeah. All right, are we done?
So there's some good questions. Okay. Thanks very much for tuning in.
Yeah.
We'll see you all during the week. We'll be doing a live stream from Romania. So hopefully there'll be some Romanian themed questions there. And thanks for watching.